Hey everybody, Robert Brennan here. Now, one thing that happens all the time in the summer, and you guys probably know this, is people say, hey, I got all this extra vegetables for my garden and I don't want them. Rule number one, never turn down free food. And that's what happened to me last week. Somebody comes to me and they say, hey, I got all these yellow beans. Can you do something with them? Of course I can. So I'm going to show you guys how to make this recipe that just finished. Stay tuned. So to get started on a project, we're going to need a few things. Now, first of all, we're going to start with the canning end of things. So we're going to need pressure canner, or in this case, you can actually use a water bath canner. It's a high acid food that we're making today with pickles. So you can do a water bath method, and that's the method we're going to do today. But I'm going to show you how, if you own a pressure canner, you can use a pressure canner to pressure can food, but you can also use it for a water bath as well. So I'm going to show you how to use the pressure canner as a water bath. So we'll go ahead and set that off to the side. A few canning tools you're going to need. Of course, you're going to need a canning funnel. And we're going to need our canning tongs to remove the cans from the boiling water. We're going to need some cans themselves. For this particular recipe, it's going to be about 3 to 4 to 5 jars, depending on a few things. How tightly you're able to pack, if you're going to add any few extras. So, you know, you're going to want to boil yourself and sterilize, I would say, minimum of 5 jars. We're going to need some rings again, of course, and some fresh lids. So we're going to move on to the food end of the ingredients now. So these are dilly beans. So we're going to need a big bunch of dill, and we're also going to need some fresh tarragon. We're going to need some vinegar, and I have 2 kinds of vinegar. I have distilled white, and I also have some cider vinegar that we're going to use. We're going to need some fresh water. I have hard water at my house. You don't want hard water when you're canning, so this is just fresh, regular, soft water. We're going to need 2 large onions, and we need 1.5 pounds of yellow or green beans, whatever you prefer. We're going to need some garlic. Now, it's going to depend on how many cans we use, because each can's going to need 4 to 5 cloves of garlic, depending on how much you like garlic. So depending on how many cans we actually use, that's how we'll know how many cloves of garlic we're going to need in the end. We're going to need some hot pepper flakes if you want to spice things up a little bit, like I like. Let's get things started. And first things first, of course, we got to sterilize the jars. So let's get a pot of water boiling. So we're just at a boil now, so we can go ahead and add the jars. And we can add all the canning rings, and we can add our canning funnel. Now, we don't want to add these lids. The problem that we have is there's this little edge of stickiness that basically creates the seal, right? So if we add these lids to the boiling water, what's going to happen is that the stickiness is going to start to sort of mingle, and it's basically going to lose its stickiness when we add it to the jar later on. So in order to sterilize these, what we're going to do is, once the boiling water's cooled a little bit, we can just sort of dip and roll them around. So as you can see, you don't really need to have an actual professional hot water bath canner. Basically, all you need is to have any sort of pot that will hold enough water to allow for 1 inch above the jars that you're using. So my pressure canner in this case is just perfect for that. All right, now first thing we're going to want to do is build our brine. For that, we're going to need a pot and a measuring cup. We're going to start off with the liquid ingredients. So we need 1 cup of distilled white vinegar. Then we're going to use a 1/4 cup of cider vinegar. And I just find this adds just a little bit different flavor, but it doesn't overpower the brine. Next, we need some salt, and we're going to use 2 tablespoons plus 1 teaspoon of pickling salt. And finally, we're going to go ahead and finish it off with 1 cup and 1/4 cup of the water. So this builds basically a pickling brine. You could use this for really quite a few different vegetables and they come out tasting great. This is just the liquid component. So when we start thinking about what kind of flavors we're going to add down the road, whether it's going to be spicy or whether it's going to be garlicky or whether it's going to be dilly, we can do that inside the actual jars themselves. But anything that you do want to infuse as far as flavors directly into the brine, now's the time. So you can experiment with that. But meanwhile, we got to bring this up to a boil. So let's get it on. In the meantime, we need to prep everything else. So I have these yellow beans, and we're just going to take the ends off. You can either do that with a knife, just by cutting the ends off like so. So one trick you can try is lining up a series in the same row and actually cutting off the tips of 5 or 6 of them at once. All right, now that we have that done, we need to cut up these onions. So basically just sharp knife. We're going to cut the ends off those and just peel them through. Now the onions we're going to want to keep fairly chunky, but still cut them into strips. Okay, garlic next. Basically what we're looking for is whole peeled cloves, just like this. So they're pretty easy to do. So for the garlic, we're just going to cut off the end like so. And then we're just going to give it a little bit of a tap just to loosen up the skin. Like that, and then we'll be able to peel it off quite easily. Now on TV, you'll see a chef do this, and then we kind of end up with a lot of crushed garlic, okay? We don't want that for inside these jars, we just want whole pieces of garlic. So the 10 minutes are up and the jars are ready to come out, and I'm just going to go ahead and place them on this paper towel that I have set up. This is going to create an environment here and sort of block off everything, so I know that this is sterile and I'm not going to touch it with my bare hands. Now at this point I like to wear gloves, and the reason for that is just to keep everything sterile. If you touch and contaminate these jars, you have the potential to contaminate your batch, so it's just much easier for me to just go ahead and throw some gloves on. And what we're going to do next is build the jars. And what I mean by build the jars is fill them. But unlike jams or jellies or any sort of liquid, you can't just pour it in, right? So what you're going to have to do is start finding pieces of the beans that look the same and just start going around and placing them inside the jars until you can have the whole jar sort of filled up. Now, along the way, you're going to want to interweave some of these chunks of onions and get those in there, like so. And then I like to have about 4 or 5 of these heads of garlic. So we're going to go ahead and put those in there as well. We're going to get sort of a nice just chunk of this tarragon, and get that sort of broken up into that jar as well, okay? All of these flavors are just going to steep inside of the jars and make everything taste really delicious. One thing you're going to want to get in there is a good bit of this dill. You're going to want handfuls of this stuff. If you're a real dill lover like I am, go ahead and just pull off big wads like that of the dill. And just shove it in there. And you can use the stems and everything, right? We're not actually going to be eating the dill later, so just go ahead and shove everything in there. It's all going to be great flavor. I like to put peppercorns in mine. So I'm going to put about 5 to 10 peppercorns per, depending on how much you like them. And that's per jar. And now, if you also want to add something a little spicy to the mix, go ahead and get these red chili flakes and just take a dessert spoon and just sort of the tip of the dessert spoon, or if you like it really hot, go ahead and put more. But I like to just put a little tip of the dessert spoon, and we just go ahead and shake that in there like that, and that's going to add a lot of nice, really good spice. So go ahead and try that at least once. If you don't like spice, don't put it in. If you like more spice, put more in. But this is kind of where you get to experiment. Next, we can ladle in the boiling brine, and then we can just press everything down to make sure that it's below the water line. What we're going to do is we're going to take the lids, like I said, and we're going to take it in the water, which is now just simmering, and we're going to only hold it along the edges and just dip it into the water. Once we've done that, it's sterile on the inside, so you want to make sure you don't touch the inside of this lid at all before you jar up the cans. So we're going to go ahead and add the lids. And then add one of the sterile rings. Now what we want to do is we just want to get it nice and thumb tight. This is just to hold the lids down. We're not actually going to be using that to create a seal. So what I've done is I've taken the water that we used to sterilize the jars in the first place, and I've reduced it from a boil to a simmer. So now we can just add the jars back to the simmering water. So what we're looking for is just to have slight small bubbles simmering away, and that's considered a simmer. We want to make sure that we have the water level at least an inch above the top of the caps. That will ensure that we have enough water to allow for the seal to create. You're going to go ahead and leave this on a simmer for 10 minutes, and that will process the jars. All right, I just heard the timer, so we're going to go ahead and retrieve those jars. All right, that's the last one there. Now these are going to actually pop and snap and make some noises for the next few hours, and basically what that's doing is creating the seal. So when you hear the pop and the snap, that's really good. But you do definitely want to leave it for 24 hours on the counter and then test the seals. And how do you do that? Well, essentially I'm going to show you this on a can that we didn't jar yet because these are too hot to touch. And what you're looking for, and I'll demonstrate on this jar that isn't filled, is this sort of noise here. If you can hear that, the jar isn't sealed, okay? So at that point you have a few options. You could either put it in the fridge and use it up in the next few weeks, or you can try to reseal it again and reprocess it. So if you press down on this lid and you hear nothing, and there's no give, and there's no snap, there's no pop, then you've made a great seal, and you can go ahead and put those into your storage room for anywhere between 6 to 12 months. 12 months sort of being the max for these. After you've opened them up and you tried a few and you put them back in the fridge for a later date, you're going to have to use them up between 2 to 3 weeks. That said, unfortunately, you're going to have to wait 3 weeks for these things to actually pickle. So if you guys enjoyed that video, please check out some of my other videos. I have a canning chicken stock video that you can click on here and view. Otherwise, please subscribe and you'll get all my videos whenever they come out. And I hope you guys had a great time, and we'll see you next time.